In my last video, I show how I remove moisture out of the core of my deck. My boat has a teak deck, and the core on a boat that has a teak deck that's screwed in with screws, usually the screws will leak. Moisture gets down into the core, and it can start to rot the core. And so in my last video, I was talking about how there's a boat back east just like mine on the East Coast, and the guy tore his teak deck up. He was going to refiberglass it and just go with fiberglass instead of teak, and he removed the top layer of fiberglass and got down to the core. This type of boat, it's Formosa 41, has a plywood core for the deck. Looking at his, every screw hole, there was the core had gotten wet, and the moisture was probably about the size of a quarter around where each screw was screwed into the core. So the previous owner of this boat treated the deck core with epoxy, penetrating epoxy. Then he let that cure, and then he re-screwed the teak back down. So he just removed the screws and then poured acetone, used a syringe, and put acetone down into the screw holes. And that goes down into the core, and then when the acetone evaporates, and acetone evaporates really fast, so when it evaporates, it draws the moisture out of the core. So I did that last week. That was in my last video. I treated it with acetone a couple times this week just to try to get as much moisture out as I possibly can. So it's been sitting all summer, no rain here. It's California, and it's the end of September now. And so the deck's been dry for months. And so now I'm going to go ahead and start putting in the penetrating epoxy. So I'm going to show how I do that. And that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so I did one row of screws. So there's 7 screws here that I removed. I'm going to do them one at a time. So this is my first time doing this. So I just want to see how it's going to go. I'm not going to go tearing all of the screws out and try to do this all in one shot. So I'm just going to do it a little at a time because there's a lot of them, as you can see. The other side of the boat, the previous owner did, from the front of the cabin all the way back to the very back of the cabin. So this whole area on the other side of the boat has been redone, and it's worked out great. And he probably did that maybe about 15 years ago, and it's real solid. So you can see I have rows here, and some of them have wooden bungs, and some of the that cover over the screws, and then some of the screws, the bungs came out, so you can see the screws, and the screws will sometimes they'll back themselves out. I don't know if it's because of the vibration of the diesel engine that causes that. Diesel engines vibrate a lot, so that could be why. And so you can see, like this row here, there's a couple bungs that had come out, and you can see the screws. And then this next row, all the bungs stayed in. That looks good. That's how it should look. This next row, all the bungs are in. And then this row here, I removed the bungs that were still in, and I removed all of the screws. And then I went ahead and I put this acetone using a syringe. I just cut the bottom out of a water bottle for drinking water. Used a plastic syringe, and then I just went ahead and injected acetone down in here. And I did that last week, and then I did it again early this morning. It's been sitting most of the day today, so I think it's dried out enough now. At least I hope it is. So now I'm going to go ahead and mix up some penetrating epoxy, pour it into that bottom of a water bottle that I cut out, and I'm going to try to use that same syringe that I used for the acetone to inject the penetrating epoxy down in those holes. And then I'm going to put a weight on it with a board across it with a weight, which is going to be a 5-gallon bucket of water. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up the epoxy and put it down in these holes. And then I'll put weight on it and let it cure. And then I come back, and what I'll do is I will take a real small drill bit, drill down in each hole a little ways down, and then I'll screw in wood screws, and that's after the epoxy has cured. So that's why I want to put the weight on it, because I don't want the chance that the epoxy is going to get under those planks anyway, and onto the fiberglass and underneath the teak planks, and so I want to make sure that they're glued down tight. But I want that epoxy to cure first. I don't want to just try to screw the screws in. I don't think I'm going to try that. I'm going to try the weights first. Eventually I might experiment and see how it goes. I might be able to screw it in when the epoxy's wet. The problem with that is then the screw's going to be glued in too, and if I ever have to remove them, it's going to be really difficult. I don't think that's a good idea. So let's see how this goes. This is the epoxy I'm going to use. Now, it would probably be best just to use the West System epoxy. It'd probably be cheaper in the long run, but just because I'm doing this small amount, I didn't want to buy a bunch of epoxy right now. This is penetrating epoxy that's designed to treat rotted wood. And so it's super thin. How it works is, and I had another boat I bought in Santa Cruz a long time ago, and I sailed it up the coast to San Francisco Bay. And when I got into the bay, after I bought it, I didn't realize it. I didn't get a survey, but I crawled through the entire boat. The boat was made out of plywood, and it was fiberglassed over. It was built by a cabinet maker, and it was actually really nice. He did a good job. But I went in and I had an awl, which is like an ice pick, and I went through and I poked every square inch of that boat inside, because dry rot happens from the inside out on wooden boats. And what happens is rainwater gets in the boat, and that's what causes the rot, because rainwater has rot organisms in it and salt water don't. And so what happens is rainwater gets in, it causes dry rot. And I couldn't find any. The previous owner said he's never seen any. And so I went ahead and bought the boat. I got a really good deal because the engine was just sitting on wooden blocks. He had moved the engine to a different location on the boat, and he couldn't figure out how to attach the engine to the boat. And I come along and bought the boat, and I was able to make it work, and so it worked out actually pretty good. But when I got to San Leandro, which is in the San Francisco Bay, about 6 months after I was there, 5 or 6 months. It was I think it was September when I noticed it. I had a cabinet open in the head and under the sink, and I noticed the paint didn't look right. It looked kind of like it was peeling, and so I had to go to work. I worked on a research farm in Central Valley, and I had to leave. I saw it in the morning, Monday morning, when I left to go to work. So I thought, well, I'll come back the following weekend and see what's going on with that wood. And so I took an awl, which is, like I said, is like an ice pick, and I noticed that the wood looked like dry rot. And I didn't notice it when I bought the boat, because there was this little tiny shelf. It was just a little piece of wood about this wide that was on the stringer on the bottom of the boat, on the side, but down towards the bottom. And underneath there, water had gotten under that little shelf and accumulated, and that's what caused the dry rot. So I took this awl and I pushed it into the wood, and it went right in really easy. And when I pulled the awl out, water started coming in the boat. Unfortunately, I poked a hole. It was probably less than an inch below the water line. If I'd been an inch higher, water wouldn't have came in. It would have went all the way out through the boat, through the hole outside, but I would have been above the water line. But unfortunately, I was below the water line, and water started squirting in. And yeah, that was a really bad feeling. Talk about feeling sick. And I didn't know what I was going to do. My boat could sink. And I could literally push my finger through the hull of the boat. That's how bad the dry rot was. And even though the boat was totally fiberglassed on the outside, it was only fiberglassed with one layer of fiberglass cloth, which doesn't really do much. And the fiberglass actually can rot too. So, especially a little thin piece like that. And so the fiberglass really didn't do anything. So I had a West Marine, and this is company West Marine, where I buy a lot of my stuff. I had a catalog on board. And so I started looking through it, and I found a product called Get Rot. It wasn't, this is West Marine's version of Get Rot, but there's another company that makes the same type of penetrating epoxy, and it's called Get Rot. That's what it'll say on the box. and that's what I got. And it's really good stuff. So I went ahead and I had to drill a series of hole, like grid of holes into every inch or so apart into the dry rot area of the boat, and but not all the way through, just into it a little ways. And then you use this little bottle that comes with it. So what this is it's a 2-part epoxy. So it has resin, a bottle of resin, and a bottle of hardener. You have to mix these together, and it gives you this little squeeze bottle. And what you do is it's 2-to-1, the ratio of mixture. So 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. And so you fill the resin up to here, and then you fill the rest, the hardener up to there, and then you shake it for at least 1 minute vigorously. Then you can you poke a little hole with a needle, and then you go and I have a series of holes like these holes here, and I just squirted it in to the dry rot. And the thing about dry rot, it's like a sponge. It just soaked this epoxy, and this epoxy is really thin. And so it just soaked it up like a sponge, and then it hardens. And actually, when I was done treating that area that had dry rot, I truly believe that that area was stronger than the other side of the boat that didn't have dry rot in that same area. So it works really good. Plus, I took some Get Rot, and after I mixed it together, and I poured it into a Ziploc bag and let it cure in the bottom of a Ziploc bag straight across. And I wanted to see how brittle it was, and it was super flexible, not brittle at all. And that's really good, because epoxy, when it's brittle, can shatter. So it's really strong, and I really truly believe that if I had just cut the dry rot out and put new wood in there, that it wouldn't be as strong as the rotted wood that I treated with the penetrating epoxy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix this up. Now I'm not going to mix the whole amount here, because this is way more than I'm going to need for this. So I went ahead and marked the bottle for a 2-to-1 ratio here. So this is 2 parts to this line of resin, and then I'll put in 1 part of hardener to this, and then I'll shake this up. But I'm not going to use this bottle. I'm going to use this syringe, and hopefully I can get it to work. So I can get farther down and try to get this into the core of the wood. So the wood core in this boat is plywood. So there's a layer of teak planks set on a layer of fiberglass. Underneath that layer of fiberglass is a plywood core, and under the plywood core is another layer of fiberglass. So that's what I'm going to do now, and we'll see how it works. Okay, now hopefully I won't spill this. Okay, so I filled it to the bottom line with the resin. And now I'm going to put the hardener in and then shake it up good. Okay. So that's 2 parts resin, 1 part hardener. And then I'm going to shake it up for at least 1 minute. Okay, so now you want to work fast, because this stuff's going to start to harden. And it'll start getting hot, and hopefully it won't melt my container here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour this into here. And I'm going to lightly screw this back on, but not too tight because it's going to glue itself back on here, and I might want to reuse this bottle. So I'm not going to put it on real tight. Just set it aside. And now, kind of have some acetone still in this syringe. See if I can get most of it out. Should have done this earlier. Okay, I think that's good. Now, I'll see if I can draw this into the syringe. Just going slowly. Looks like it's going. Okay. Start up on top. I'm going to go down in here. First, I'm going to see if there's anything coming out. Oh, yeah, it's coming out. I'm going to go slow. I don't want to overfill these holes. Matter of fact, that one's full. I'm going to go to the next one and go down in there, try to get down on the screw hole and try to inject it into the wood, into the core of the boat. I have to be careful because there's going to be pressure in this by squeezing down, and if I lift this syringe out, it's going to go squirting out everywhere. It was doing that with the acetone, and I don't want to get a lot of, see, that's going to start running out. So I'm going to need to get a paper towel because I don't want a big bunch of this stuff all over my deck. And I'll just have to come back with some acetone on a paper towel and clean this up a little bit. But it's coming out. I just have to go real slow with this and just keep going over and over it. Okay, so I'm pushing down on the syringe and I'm holding it down in the screw hole, and I'm just keeping the syringe in there, and because if I pull it back up, the pressure is still in the syringe is going to cause it to squirt out. So I want it to go down into the core, so it's just a matter of trial and error, and I better be careful with this. I don't want to spill that. So I'm just going to take my time because I want it to get into the plywood core and not so much underneath the teak planks. I mean, it's going to get under the teak planks anyway, and that's why I want to put weight on it because that'll actually glue the teak planks down to the fiberglass deck, which is fine with me. I don't have a problem with that. I think the trick is to put pressure on it. And then I can let it go because this syringe is so tight. This piston part of it's really tight. It's still under pressure right now, even though I'm not pushing down on it. I'm just going to stay there for a few seconds. And I think I mixed up too much epoxy because I don't know. We'll see how this goes. Now I'm going to slowly pull this up. And hopefully it doesn't come back out. It's coming back out, but hopefully it's not going to... Oop, I'm making a mess. It's okay because normally you don't want to sand teak, but I can clean this up with acetone before it dries, and then if I need to sand it down a little bit I can, but I probably should have some acetone on a rag right now. It evaporates so damn fast though, it's a problem. So I'll just have to wait till I'm done with this, and then I'll clean up with acetone. Just try not to make a mess. Go back here. And just keep going. And you can see this is going to be a huge project. I mean, I got 1,000 screw holes here I'm going to have to do, so that's why I'm going to do it a little at a time. I'm not going to turn it into some huge project that's, you know, going to be a lot of work. I just do it a little at a time, just make it easy. I'm in no hurry. Ooh, I can hear it. Okay, I think it's going down in the core. Wow, that looks good. That looks good. So I think it's working. It's doing what I want it to do. I'll find out after it cures. So I'm going to put a weight on it, just leave it on for a while. A few days, maybe a week. It's going to be in my way, though. This is where I board the boat. But probably just 24 hours is enough. But I'm going to keep the weight on it for a while. And then next weekend, I'll go ahead and start putting in the screws. And then I'll be able to see how well that worked out. Let's see if there's any left. Okay, I need to refill this. Oh, careful. That's the thing that scares me the most is spilling. Knocking a container over of stuff. So I got to draw this in real slow. You have to work pretty fast because over a few minutes, this epoxy is going to start to gel, and then it won't penetrate anymore. So you have to do it pretty quick. Okay, it's going. It's this container's getting empty. That's a good sign. So this might work out to be about right. Now I think I finished. I don't think I had any going here, so I'm going to go back to this one. I think the trick is now the syringe has got pressure in it, and I don't even have to push down on the syringe. I just have to keep it down in the hole and just let the epoxy work its way in. It'll run down, even though the holes get full of the epoxy. It'll run down into the. It'll still run down into the core because there's the original screw holes that go all the way down into the core. So it's going to go in. Like I was saying, the boat that I saw back east, they get a lot more rain back east than we do out here in California, and the core that when he pulled the teak deck up, he just tore the deck off. He threw the teak wood away. He just tore it up to little pieces, and then he ripped the layer of fiberglass that's underneath here up, and it exposed the wood core. And everywhere there's a screw hole, there was a rotted area, or at least moist, about between the size of a nickel and the size of a quarter. And so it wasn't like the whole deck core was rotted. And like I said, they get a lot more rain back east, and so it's a lot drier out here on the west. So hopefully mine isn't as bad. And like I was saying earlier, the previous owner did the other side, and I think he probably did. It was at least 15 years ago when he did it. I've known this boat for a long time, way before I bought it. So, and I knew the owner. So, yeah, the other side's great. It's rock solid. So it worked really good, and it's it'll save this deck. This deck's it's in pretty good shape. I just need to go back through and seal all the seams here. So I got to dig all this out. That's going to be a big job. This all has to be dug out and then recalked. And then I clean this teak up. It'll look really nice. I was thinking I could probably put masking tape and then poke a hole with a syringe through the masking tape to keep it from spilling back out onto the deck. The problem with that is when this thin epoxy gets underneath the masking tape will not stick. It just comes loose. And I know that from experience. this outer hole. I gotta be careful. Oh man, I'm spilling it everywhere. I'm just gonna have to come back with acetone. Hopefully I can get the acetone on here for this gels. Man, these are full. So when it rains, this is the lowest part of the deck here. And when it rains, even though water doesn't accumulate here, it runs off. After it's been really wet, when I walk on this teak, I can hear it, you can hear the water underneath. So yeah, water is getting under here, under that. But part of that is because these seams need to be recaulked too. So okay, these holes are staying full now, so that's, except for this one. And it's probably just because it's running under the teak. Okay, I'm going to stop right now and clean this up for now. Let this soak in, and if this epoxy hasn't gelled, I'll continue on with what I got here. Just want to make sure I do not spill this. I'm going to set this up above here. Same place. And I got epoxy on my fingers here, and I don't want to get it on my clothes. So I'm just going to go ahead and use some acetone and clean up. So this boat looks like a wood boat. Everybody thinks it's a wood boat, but it's actually, the hull is actually a 3-inch thick solid fiberglass hull, no core. So this thing's built like a tank. It's really strong. They don't build boats like these anymore. I've had a couple people tell me, this one guy, he sailed around the world a couple times, and he just built his own aluminum boat, 68-foot aluminum boat. He told me, and someone else told me too, I had a surveyor tell me similar, that if you're going to build a replica of this boat today using the same materials that this boat's built out of, it'd cost over $1 million. So it's definitely worth fixing and working on. And it needs quite a bit of work. It's in good shape. I mean, it'll go anywhere in the world. The only thing right now is I just need to change my rigging. I need to get new rigging, and probably be good to get new sails. But other than that, the boat's, other than just pretty much this little piddly stuff, is in really, really good shape. Just cosmetic work mostly at this point. Structurally, though, it's a sound boat. It was designed by William Garden, naval architect from Canada, Vancouver. And originally these boats were built out of wood. And then someone, the story I heard, sailed one down to Taipei, Taiwan. And they used the hull as a plug to build a female mold. And then they started building these out of solid fiberglass. And so they're actually better than the original wooden boats. Because I'll never own another wooden boat. Don't ever buy a wooden boat. Unless you like doing this kind of stuff all the time, like every day. And the problem with wooden boats is you can have it surveyed and there's no dry rot. That doesn't mean that 3 months later you got dry rot somewhere. And you live with that constantly. It's always in your mind that you pull up a floorboard, and I used to just cringe, wondering what I was going to find. I'm just going to go back and just do that until the syringe is empty, and that's it. Okay, I might be able to get a little bit more out of there. Now it's starting to gel. Looks like it's gelling. Okay, so this syringe is now toast. I can't use it. I mean, I could probably try to clean it out with acetone, but I got other ones, so I'll just use new ones. And so that's done. And now I'm just going to clean up with acetone and let it set. I'll put some weight on it and just let it set and cure. Yeah, this acetone gets really cold, so that's how your refrigeration works. If you have your regular refrigerator in your house, or your boat refrigerator, if it's got coolant in it, the type that uses coolant, there's a part of the refrigeration system called the evaporator. And so what they do is they they compress this coolant, which is DuPont's trade name for it is Freon. So a lot of people just call it Freon. And so they compress the coolant with a compressor, and then it goes into, so it gets compressed in the compressor, then it goes into the evaporator where it expands, and when it expands it gets really cold. So it's just like an aerosol bottle. If you ever sprayed an aerosol bottle and you noticed it got cold as you sprayed it, that's how refrigeration works. And then the coolant circulates into another piece of the refrigeration system, which is called the condenser, and that's where it dumps the heat out. So it releases the heat back out into the atmosphere, and then it recycles again and just continues in the cycle. So then it compresses it, goes into the evaporator where it expands and it gets cold, and that's the part of your refrigeration that gets, refrigerator gets cold, and then it goes into the condenser where it dumps the heat out, and that's usually on the back side of the refrigerator where you can't see it, and it just cycles around, and that's how it works. And so the reason the acetone gets cold is it's evaporating, and that's why it's getting cold. Okay, I'm going to slit this set, and then I'm going to come back and see what it looks like after the acetone dries. It'll take a few minutes, and then I'm going to put some weight on it. The acetone hasn't completely evaporated, but it looks like it's gonna clean up pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead, because this epoxy has gelled now somewhat. It's getting thick, so I want to get some weight on this before it cures. So, because I know there's epoxy underneath the planks and on top of the fiberglass, so I'm just going to put some weight on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple boards on here, like this, and there's some camber to this deck here, but hopefully I can kind of get the weight on here to hold most of it down. I think I'm going to go across these planks here like that, and then I'm going to set this bucket on there. Looks like I need to put another little piece of wood underneath this here to push this the outer piece down, so I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to get something to put under there, I don't know what. And then I'm going to fill this bucket up with water for weight, and then that should keep that pushed down, because I want it down as far as I can get it while that cures. And I don't want to put screws into wet epoxy, because it'll glue the screws in there, and I'll never be able to get them out again if I have to take them out. So that's the plan. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some water in that bucket, fill it up, and just let it sit probably at least a whole day, probably at least a good 24 hours. They recommend, I think, 24 hours for this to cure. So if you found this video to be helpful or entertaining, please like and subscribe.